Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then... Oh, then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
You're listening to.
Y'all are listening to
What's Left of the South.
Thank you for tuning in to What's Left of the South, the podcast about Southern working class history and current events through leftist perspective. This podcast is brought to you by being in a new tax bracket, testosterone levels, anxiety, living at home, aging parents, Ian Finance, Kai's war against the British Empire, Nelson finally getting a real job moving out of his mother's house, Tyler's hiatus, which will inevitably lower our listener count, Sweet Mark's grandma's little dog, who is that bitch, and Jim Jordan's security cameras. You won't see anything. As always, I'm Nelson with...
And I'm just here for Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yay!
Not that other thing.
No.
No, never. Not moving out of Mamba's house.
Yeah. and our guest this evening for our 100th episode is
Don Guillory, author,
Yay!
historian, educator, podcast host, and member of the Bald Brotherhood. What?
Yes. You know we're about to get spooky when Don's here. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh my God. For the 100th episode on Columbus Day.
Fuck you. I wore my strong, resilient Indigenous shirt today. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're talking about Chris Columbus, the director.
The one who directed Home Alone.
Yeah.
And I think he did the first Harry Potter movie.
And he discovered America. I said before we recorded, when Mark and Kai came in, I was like, hey, it's our holiday, y'all. Yay.
Wow.
It's a day where Italian Americans and Indigenous people can celebrate in peace and harmony.
And according to SpongeBob, it's Leif Erikson Day.
Oh yeah, it's Happy Leif Erikson Day. Oh my God.
Fuck, okay. I feel so old right now.
Oh my God. Anyway,
Oh my
It's
God.
all-
My jaw is going to hurt this episode from laughing.
And it's my granddad's birthday.
yeah.
Happy birthday, Poppy.
So many things all
Poppy. And it's our 100th episode. Yay.
Yay.
Everything else after this is just, we're just going to wing it.
It is shit rolling down a hill at this point.
we outlived Pros of the Round Table, which is my inspiration for the podcast. We're probably going to outlive Chapo Trap House. Probably going to outlive other podcasts. Like we've somehow just kept
We are
going.
eternal.
We just keep.
It's
We're
like
like
when
the
you're
Borg.
mediocre, you live forever. That's just what it is.
And look at it this way. You might not outlive the number of indictments against the former president. So
There you go.
Oh,
at
okay.
91, you're 100. I mean,
Always a goal to be striving towards.
shit.
It's a good outlook.
there are more coming. There's more coming.
It's like
Oh my
every
God.
time more indictments come in, we just have to tack it on to our episode count. God damn it! Now we have to live for
It's our
another
boulder,
200
we roll up
episodes.
the hill.
The Sisyphean task is the
Oh my God.
indictments that he gets.
we somehow surpassed Speaker Kevin McCarthy's speaker
Yep.
votes. Now we have to surpass number of episodes of days he was the speaker, though. He was only speaker for like 100 and some days, right?
And all of them are chaos.
It's complete chaos. I see. The fucked up thing is that like I have not paid attention to the U.S. government in so long. I didn't even know the government's going to shut down. I totally forgot about. I didn't even realize that they were going to oust McCartney until like a few days ago, and I was just like, oh shit, the government's going to shut down, and we don't have a Speaker of the House. This is wild, dude. Republicans are fucking stupid.
Wait, okay. I like maybe it's because I was a child for a great part of this, but I don't remember the government shutting down so often when I was younger. And I don't know if it shut down so often like before I was born, so pre the late 80s. But it just feels like maybe it's like one of those things where we just have like fatigue, where it's like every few years government's going to shut down, things are going to get fucked up, and we're just like, okay.
So like it did in the they Don, how many times it shut down in the 90s?
It was like 95.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been 6 and 7 years old then, so I wouldn't remember that.
Yeah, like that was like the first major one, right? The
Because
Republicans tried to
like
blame it on.
Was it a couple months? I know it was a significant period.
Yeah,
and that was what people blame. I almost said Hillary. Monica Lewinsky. They go ahead and blame the shutdown as to why Monica Lewinsky got involved with Clinton, as opposed to saying Clinton was the one who did it.
Yeah,
but whatever. That's the thing I remember about the shutdown was, only the volunteers and interns were there. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. And then like the Republicans thought they were going to try and blame it on like the shutdown on Clinton, and then like it backfired on them, and they didn't learn at all. They didn't learn anything after that. Then I don't think it shut down under Bush. I don't remember.
I don't think it did, only because we were so swept up in jingoism and nationalism.
In the whoa.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have allowed it to shut down, because it would have just been like the powder keg would have been so primed at that moment.
God. Could you imagine? Can you imagine like the war in Iraq, the fucking financial meltdown, and the government shut down at the same time?
But you got to remember, he tried to kill my daddy.
They tried to kill Who cares? I'm gonna side with my daddy.
We're getting a weird amount of that same feeling coming around again with Ron DeSantis. Was it Ron DeSantis's hat? Or no, it was Elon Musk's hat and Ron DeSantis's boots. Where it's we're going for that folksy feeling. Well, okay, for one thing, for somebody who's been around cowboys my entire life, the hat thing I knew was not going to be as big a deal as everybody was talking about. But the boot thing, we got something to talk about there.
I got my boots.
Oh, you got my heels? The
I'm bringing fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's out there new boot goofing. Are we going to do all the memes for this?
Oh, he's boot scooting boogie.
Repayment. Genuine ostrich. Ow!
I got my gators on.
Oh my God.
Name Slickback.
Just as a weird aside, here in England the other day, I saw an old man wearing a baby, what I assume when he was sold alligator, probably baby caiman belt. And when I say like, oh, I know that it's baby alligator, baby caiman, it's not because you see like the reptile, it's because it's the entire fucking skin sans the legs. It was like links of baby caimans as a belt. I don't know what's happening.
Cruella de Vil over here.
Wow. Okay.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
Some weeks we come in and there's not a lot to talk about in the last week. And this week it feels like 8,000 things have happened.
Yeah, holy shit.
Cayman Ed Gein over here. Like, God.
I'm gonna wear your skin.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Oh my God. Well, that's a good segue into horror movies.
That is true.
Well, we're not talking about Crawl.
Wait, but real quick, didn't Musk put the hat on backwards? Wasn't that like the whole thing?
No, a high crown is normal depending on what style of hat you're wearing.
Okay.
And
I saw one where he had it backwards though.
Maybe Stetson said it's about which side the buckle is on. I think that's a fairly like recent-ish thing, and maybe there's a history to it, but it's not uncommon to see cowboy hats where the high point of the crown is in the front, and it is mostly people who aren't used to seeing highly stylized cowboy hats seeing that for the first time and going, that looks backwards.
Okay.
But I mean, it exists. Like a 10-gallon hat, like an actual 10-gallon hat with a huge crown, like it looks higher in the front than it does in the back because of the way that your head is shaped. But like, I knew that was eventually going to be like, oh, somebody's going to school them on like cowboy hats and it's going to come out. But like, everybody's going to take whatever chance they can to get a lick in on Elon Musk. I'm not going to tell them not to.
Right.
I just want like I feel like my head is so big. I just need like a round one. It just needs to stay round. It's like
A bowler?
wide. Yeah, just a
You mean a
bowler with a
sombrero?
wide.
No, sombreros have a pointed crown.
That
Okay,
would
we're going
be-
to talk about sartorial
Well, you said
issues here.
around. It was like a
I just want
sombrero.
like
Yeah, the
a
brim.
round, like a rounded, like a dome
Well,
hat, like
okay,
a wide,
Like
if
a
you wanna-
farmer's hat?
If you want to,
like a old missionary hat, I guess. That they fucking
if you
used
want to
wear.
go into it, a derby and a bowler were far more common in the Old West than a 10-gallon or a crowned hat. They were
Yeah,
just more
see?
common.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Anyway, so speaking of scary stuff, Mark, tell us about your grandma's dog's outfit because that was horrifying.
It says Little Miss Attitude on it, and it's a little pink hoodie.
This is the same dog. Okay, Nelson wants to tell Dawn the story of what happened with this little dog when we met her. So we're gonna go back into this.
We all go back in time and we go to help Mark
A year
after
ago.
Exactly a year ago.
Exactly, almost exactly a year ago. So in the hills of North Georgia. But so oh no, did I freeze? Damn it. In the hills of North Georgia. Ooh. But so Mark's grandma has a little poodle doll.
No.
Poodle dog. What is it, Mark?
No.
Then what is it?
It's the
Bichon
bacon fries.
Frise.
Yeah.
A freeze. Oh yeah. So it's white and it has that shit around its mouth. You know how white dogs get? It looks like they just like
Her
devour
nicotine
it.
stains, as I lovingly call it. She looks like an 80-year-old man because it's just like
God.
it's
Nicotine.
bushy and like discolored.
It's like a big bushy mustache from just years of smoking Marlboro Reds, right? And the dog, Don, has black eyes, right? And it kept barking and trying to bite our ankles, right? So it's like a wild dog. And Kai, the room that Kai was staying in was like catty cornered to the kitchen and like the back door. So if you opened Kai, if you open the bedroom door, you could see into the kitchen and then like the back door. You have like a straight shot, right? You could see through like 3 different rooms. So Kai, correct. Did you have to go to the bathroom when you were just like?
I had to get some water to take my nighttime pills.
Yeah. So Kai cracks open the door to try to leave because we know the dog's out there. We know the dog's going to bark. We know the dog's wild and going to bite our legs off. So Kai cracks open the door and looks out, and this dog is staring from like 2 rooms away right at her. And the dog has black eyes, lifeless eyes, like a doll's eyes.
It's just 2 shining little black pits in a dark room.
Until it bites you and those black eyes roll back white. And then Kai, what happened? You stared.
When I opened the door, the dog didn't bark immediately, so I thought, oh well, maybe if nobody's here, the dog will be a bit more chill. So I inch forward to go out this door, and as soon as I did that, the dog jumps up and it does that fucking Wile E. Coyote run where it's like got no traction on the ground and it's just scrabbling towards me, and barking its ass off.
And those black eyes roll over white. That was
dog
a
has
wild
it out.
time, man. That was probably one of the best. That was probably one of the best weekends of my life. Just hanging out with y'all and dealing with Mark post surgery, and then Kai and I's wild ride through Atlanta. That was like some of the most fun I've had in a long time. We made s'mores, so we didn't record the podcast. That was fucking
We heard
great.
somebody's dogs just go fucking nuts up in the woods.
Mark's like those coyotes.
No, you'll know if it's a coyote.
Oh my god.
That's it. When I was in Utah, I was staying at this place where we were like on the plains next to where like a cliff, like a mesa was, but it's quite a long way from where we were to where this mesa like started, but it was like a sheer cliff. And way down there next to the cliff, I heard some coyotes howling, and it was like dusk. We were sitting around a campfire where we were staying, and there was a bunch of drunk Australians who were there. So we're sitting there talking to them, and I'll bring this up because it's Indigenous Peoples Day. I think like 6 times a year about this particular drunk Australian woman who was okay. So the bonfire had a stone ring around it that was high enough to sit on. So she was sitting on this stone ring with the bonfire at her back and her phone getting ready to fall out of her back pocket into the fire. So I'm like talking to her and thinking like I need to tell her phone's going to fall out of her pocket. And at the moment I was getting ready to tell her that, she asked me if I was afraid I was going to breed the Indian out of my children because I married a white man. And at that point I'm like, not going to tell you about your phone anymore.
Oh my God.
But because like, okay, so this is happening in the same evening. I heard the coyotes start to howl down near the mesa. And I go, oh, do you hear that? That's coyotes out there. And these like 6 drunk Australians were immediately like, are they dangerous? Do we need to go inside? Are they going to come get us? Like,
they're going to get
They're
you.
like a mile away and they literally want nothing to do with us unless we leave our s'mores making kits next to this bonfire. But I mean, you could let your friend just fall into the bonfire and let her phone burn and let her burn up. And I'm not going to tell you anything about the local wildlife anymore because y'all think all of it's dangerous. Y'all can stay out here for all I care.
You should have told them the coyotes have guns and they're going to come get us.
I tell them, oh yeah, you don't have to worry until you see one walking on just 2 legs.
Yeah.
Then you have to be worried.
Then you got to be worried.
At that point, I'm already going to be inside. So
that's just my cousin. Uncle.
I ain't gonna fuck around like that, but y'all can.
No, fuck that shit. I'm out of here. Speaking of horror and scary stuff, Don, you're our resident horror expert, right? You're the author. I dabble. You dabble. You got the horror pot. You got the scary podcast. You got all the spooky stuff. So we are going to be talking, since it's spooky. It's a spooky month, and last week we had Joshua on to talk about paranormal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to talk about horror movies, and I guess like why do certain things scare us when it comes to horror movies? So
that's a deep question.
I know, right? I was thinking about it a lot because I have the movie I want to talk about, like a specific like thing that just, and I think in a lot of horror movies that freaks people out, and but I'll get to that when we get to me. But Don, I wanted to hand it off to you, Don, because you talk about horror a lot, and you're like I said, you're the author, you're the podcast, you're everything. You're the expert. So I wanted to hand it off to you first and tell us about some of your favorite horror movies. Why do you think that those things not just scare you, but also scared people? Like what scares us? Like what is, because there's so many different genres of horror. There's so many different things that scare people. And it's forever changing. So like, why do you think that? Well, why do you think the movies that you choose are scary? But like, why do you think that horror scares us to begin with? Like, what is it about us?
Here's what it comes down to: different things scare different people. So, and we enjoy like dabbling into those worlds where we're safe because the stuff on screen is not happening to us, but we do try to have this suspension of a belief that, what if there were zombies outside? What if I were out swimming and some shark was around? It's all these things that are based on reality or possibility that we then think about what would possibly happen to us in those situations. For me, and this is not my favorite horror movie, but I will fight tooth and nail to tell everyone that this is the first horror movie, which is Birth of a Nation. And that movie itself, for me, is probably the most frightening movie because the real world results. If you have something like, the classic slashers where we're talking about Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's all built in this absurdity of, there's this crazy guy, or which again, you get into ableism with all these characters, where Leatherface has some type of developmental disability. Michael Myers has some type of psychological dysfunction. Same thing with Jason, and then Freddy Krueger is the whole idea of not the reboot where he's a pedophile, but the original where he's just killing kids. Not that that's any better, but I mean, there's a distinction as far as the backstories. But his issue is he's disabled because he's a burn victim. But it's always like, oh, these are the people that are problematic. And I'll come back to that. So you got the absurdity of those films where it's like, this isn't something that's really going to harm me, but you may be, I don't know, a little bit standoffish with people who have different disabilities or limitations. And unfortunately, that the way those movies are made, some people tend to look at people in the real world that way, as far as like something's wrong with you. If you look at like gun violence in America, every time we talk about it, it goes right to mental health and mental illness. And it's like mentally ill people are going to be the ones that are going to hurt you. And not realizing that you have mentally, people who are dealing with different types of mental issues that never going to harm anybody, never going to do anything. But you put that fear out there in the world of these are the people that are going to hurt you. And you contrast that with something like Birth of a Nation, where they do the same thing, where it's like, hey, all these black people, they got freedom and look what they want now. They all want white women. And I cannot tell you how many papers, articles, books I've read where they're quoting people from that time period, where they're quoting people from the previous century, where they're quoting people during Jim Crow, where they're quoting people during the Civil Rights Movement, all the way up till today of this is the problem is these guys are going to take your women from you, which gets into all types of psychosocial paranoia. But Birth of a Nation is really damaging because it can be directly linked to the resurgence of the Klan, the rebirth of the Klan in 1915, and the expansion of it to the point where you had several million members in the 1920s, like out in the public with their sheets, with their banners, with their flags, and showing themselves as this benevolent organization when, within their own communities, they're enacting all types of violence, all types of voter suppression, all types of economic constraints as well, and political, I'm sorry, not political control, social and economic controls to prevent people from accessing resources. And since this is Indigenous Peoples Day, I do want to say this. One of my favorite parts of history itself is when the Lumbee Nation beat the shit out of the Klan, because the NAACP and the Urban League had contacted, they knew that, a Klan rally was taking place, and the members of Lumbee Nation were like, you guys don't need to go there. We'll take care of it. Beat the absolute shit out of Klansmen, and then stole their sheets, stole flags, stole their banners, and then did a photo shoot with them, which was awesome. But the good thing about a horror movie is it gives you that sense of a break from reality, but it gives you enough of reality where you're going to be somewhat scared. So if we're talking about paranormal films, what was the one Conjuring. If you're looking at something like The Conjuring or anything in the Conjuring universe, Annabelle, all this other stuff that's out there, you look at it and the question then becomes, why am I scared about this? Why am I concerned about this? And it's that idea that I don't know what's out there. There may be ghosts, there may be demons, there may be these things that are out there. And it's that not knowing about those things and what they're capable of, which drives that fear in you of like, well, if this stuff is true, something bad could happen to me, and I wouldn't want to go through this. But as far as the reason why we like it, I like the fact that more people are admitting that they like horror, because for the longest time, you had people that would say, I don't watch horror movies, they're too corny, they're goofy, they're this, they're ridiculous, they're this. And then I would enter into conversations with them and ask them, what do you watch? And they would point out, I don't know, the Bachelor or what was that show with Kerry Washington? Scandal, all these different things. Or my mom, she swears that she doesn't like horror movies, but her television is stuck on the ID channel and true crime shows all the time. And I point out to her, I'm like, Mom, you don't dislike horror. And in fact, a good number of the people who say they don't like horror don't dislike horror. They dislike the idea or the cliched version that people have kind of created, that generalized understanding of what horror is, which is just mindless slashers. There's no point, there's no story. Horror movies have, in my opinion, more depth than any other major genre, because you can get into political conversations, social conversations, historical conversations, just within a film that could be 60 minutes on one end to a film that's 2 hours. You can talk about domestic violence. You can talk about child sexual violence. You can talk about racism, sexism. You can talk about the way in which Islamophobia is represented, or attacks on indigenous communities. There's a lot that's there that people don't realize because they're not willing to have those conversations about it. They look at the film as, Cabin in the Woods. Oh my gosh, this was a really good spoof of, the horror genre in the 70s and 80s. When in reality, it's about your expectations of people and the way that we kind of look at someone and automatically generalize and stereotype them. And that's what all those kids are there. It's like, you got to have the jock, you got to have the stoner, you got to have the brainiac, the virgin, whatever. And you see that from these people, none of them are the things that they have been cast as. It's just that you need to have that presented in order to have this ceremony take place. I'm going to give you a long answer. So, but one of
that's great. That's great.
Two of my favorite movies, and the thing is, it's difficult to get into this when I'm talking about horror. I'm sorry, talking about films, because then I break them down into horror and whatever. But my two favorite horror films are Night of the Living Dead and Jaws. And people would argue back and forth that, Jaws is just a shark movie. It's just about this. No, Jaws is about man versus nature on one end. It's also about man versus man. And then it's about man versus abstract thing, which would be capitalism, where Sheriff Brody or Chief Brody is making this argument of like, we need to close the beaches because we need to take care of people. We need to make sure everybody's safe. And the mayor and the city council convince him like, well, it probably wasn't a shark that did this. It was probably a barracuda. We need to keep the beaches open because we need that money. This is a big weekend for us. The summer, if we don't have these people coming to the beaches, they're going to go to other beaches and the town is going to die off. And you saw the same thing taking place in states like Florida, Mississippi, Texas. Not to pick on those states, but those are the states that did it, where they did not want to have any types of shutdowns for COVID. And you just saw spikes in death rates. And it became an issue of like, no, we're about freedom. We're about ensuring that people can do what they want and they can choose to do what they want with their bodies, blah, blah, blah. Well, then, of course, Texas and Florida do something else when it has to deal with somebody's bodies. But anyway, I digress. You see those parallels where individuals that are in the real world will ignore the danger that is very there and very present. When you start having people wash up that have been eaten by a shark, you have to figure out, damn it, there's a shark out there. We should be careful. And you have people dying of this disease where you understand it's highly communicable. It's highly contagious and deadly. But then you have people who look at it like the shark, probably a barracuda. It was probably something small. Oh, these guys caught a shark. It was probably that one. Beaches are safe. And ignoring that, you have experts telling you this is the type of shark that did it. That is not the shark that you caught. We need to find it. And until we find it, we need to close all this down. Science. This disease is very dangerous. You need to exercise, distance from people. You need to work from home if you can. You need to cover up. You need to get your vaccinations when they're available. You need to do all these things. And you had people still saying, what do you know? I don't know what's in the vaccine, so I'm not going to take it. While they're, vaping at the same time. I don't know what's in the vaccine. I don't want to take it. You know what? My kids need to be in school so they can socialize. I need a haircut. I need a massage. I need that. So it became this this thing of you had all those people wanting to swim and use the beach, and in the real world, you had all those people who just wanted to get out of their house, and they did not care about the dangers. And as a result, we're at well over 1 million people in the United States that have passed from it, and all because people did not want to stop for a couple of weeks and it then get back to real life, as opposed to I gotta stay in my house and I don't like it. And yeah, whereas Night of the Living Dead, which comes out in 1968 by George Romero, has a great social commentary throughout the film, even though George Romero makes the argument that I put no social commentary in this. Kind of the same thing that Charlie Chaplin used to say, even though you look at his movies and you realize there's a lot of social commentary. I didn't put anything in here. The one thing he didn't do was when he hired Doug Jones to play Ben, he didn't intentionally hire him because he was a black actor. He hired him because he did the best in the audition. So he wasn't thinking about, I've got a black male lead and it's 1968. How is this going to look? How are people going to receive it? I'm just worried about, I created these new monsters called flesh eaters, called ghouls. I created these new monsters that are gonna take the world by storm. So you have this film that has a black male lead. You get to see class come up. You get to see race get discussed. You get to see gender issues come up, and probably the most significant moment for me in that film, out of two moments, I'm sorry, is when Ben, the character Ben, tells the other family that's been hiding in the house, tells the dad, like, you guys go stay in the basement. You can be the boss down there. I'm the boss up here. Or when George Romero has something that he doesn't think is going to, he doesn't think about how it's probably going to be poorly received in the South. You have a black male slapping a white woman and knocking her out in the film because she's hysterical. She's having issues. And he's like, no, like, you're not going to go outside. Boom. I got to put you to sleep. I got to stop you from doing that because you're going to put everybody else in danger. And then you get to the end of the film where it's clear it's the end of the movie. We're going to have this good ending. And then the hero of the film gets killed by, the sheriff's department and the police and everything. And you think about the way that works, where they just see him. They don't ask him, hey, are you human? Hey, are you alive? They just see him and oh, there's another one. Boom. And shoot him. And thinking about the way in which you can talk about police brutality, you can talk about even if he had been alive, if they knew that he wasn't a zombie, a flesh eater, or whatever, would their decision have been any different? Because in those situations, with any zombie films or zombie TV shows, you understand that people quickly change their behavior. They change how they interact with people. Their decision-making changes from the way it's presented to where it's about preservation for themselves. And it's not necessarily about ensuring that everybody is safe. It's, if I think that you possibly are a danger, we'll deal with it.
Just really, really quick, if anybody wants more information about the story of the Lumbee fighting the KKK, go back and listen to our episode number 42, The Lumbee People, with Dr. Brittany Hunt, where we talk about that more at length. But okay, back to the conversation that we were actually having. I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you're here, because this is the kind of stuff that I want to talk about like all the time. It's like how horror affects the people who are watching it, and also how the people who are making it are affecting the horror. Like, it's such a good conversation.
well, so one thing I forgot to mention, and I try to remember this every time I have this conversation about this film, is that George Romero had a copy of the print in his trunk when he was going to screen the film, and on the radio, Martin Luther King had just been shot. So he had no idea again, going into releasing the film and making the film, had no idea the social effect this movie would have or impact it would have by having a prominent black male lead, not prominent actor playing it, but as far as like you got a black male lead that's not doing any of the stereotypes, and nothing against Sidney Poitier, but you know, it's not Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where I'm all about respectability. I'm a doctor. I'm this.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
and you have to respect me and want me to be your daughter's husband, because look at me. I'm great. I'm this. Right? Love the movie. I'm just saying, like, the way it gets approached. As opposed to Ben's character, where you don't know what he's done. You don't know who he is. And it becomes an issue of you're looking at Ben as a person and not as something that's wrapped up in another identity, to where, not that I would ever say, oh, his color becomes irrelevant, but his color doesn't become a focus of the story. It doesn't become a focus of the narrative. But as far as the audience, his color is very important, because you're looking at him. And I honestly believe if it had been a white male lead in that role, the movie still would have done well. It still would have spawned all this other stuff. But I think the public would have seen it in a different way, especially that ending. Maybe people would have been more sympathetic. But then again, maybe the images that were used at the end, which looked like lynching photos, the images that were used at the end wouldn't have been as impactful. You would have looked at it as, oh shit, Ben didn't make it. But you look at it now and you're like, oh shit, Ben didn't and this looks really messed up. This looks really bad. And I can see the relationship between what's taking place in the film in 68 and what's taking place in our communities in 68. As far as these marginalized communities are receiving, over policing, police brutality in a lot of cases, and very little advocacy, because there's nobody who stands up for Ben. There's not like another officer's like, no, I think that guy's regular. I think he's normal. There's nobody that advocates for him. Boom. So it makes it even more tragic, because you're sitting there. Every time I watch the movie, I know this. I'm like, God damn it, Ben, please live. Please. It's like the end of Glory. I'm like, come on, Denzel, don't get shit.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, who wants to go next about their favorite horror movies and how it impacts them?
Mark or Kai, do you guys want to go before I rant and start raving? Or do you guys want to go first? I'll let you
Mark, you got something?
Well, I don't have like a deep, very like, I don't know. I was thinking of what like disturbed me the most. And every time some edgy TikToker brings this movie up, I want to just like remove my brain and put it like in a bowl of bleach and like leave it there until I have no memory. And they're making another one.
Oh.
So Tusk is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
I will debate you on that one. I will not say that's the worst. There's one that's
just a race to the bottom, right? It's
right.
Not that you're defending Tusk, but that it's a race to the bottom.
Right. No, and then like
I'm not defending it. I'm just
I've never
saying,
seen like the Human Centipede, because I knew what that was about before it got to me. I was genuinely surprised with Tusk. I had no clue. I hadn't even seen the cover. It was just on. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine. Oh, that guy is kind of weird. Oh, okay, he's a little more than a little weird. And then body horror. Like, just like unsanitary. Just that every time.
Is that the production company that shall not be named that did that one?
I don't think so. I don't know.
We're an anti A24 podcast. We are massive.
I don't care.
Uncut Gems was good. Everything else, we are a massive anti A24 podcast.
Okay, I'm gonna ask why the A24 dislike, not necessarily A24 hate.
Kevin Smith made Tusk.
I thought that he was part of it.
I thought it was. Personally, a former host of the podcast was like, he made A24 his entire personality, and he's a shitty person and no longer on the podcast. Personally, I didn't like A24 even before him because one, most people who I found that like are obsessed about A24 are just horrible people. And
Okay.
second, like there's this TikTok that summed it up perfectly. It's that dude that like pretends to do cocaine. It's like, let's do a Mad Lib A24 film. And it's just like the part where he says, oh, well, the people are like, what's that ending? It was so, I don't get it. The cinematography and the acting was amazing, but that ending, is it a metaphor? Like, what is it? And then they'll go home and read an article about it and then like take the information from that article and go talk to their friends and pretend they realized that was the point of the movie the entire time. And we're going to make a okay amount of money. And I'm just like, that is every fucking A24 ad. Like, none of
Yeah, you
y'all
look it up when you're done.
Yeah, none of y'all understood anything about this fucking acid trip of a movie that didn't make any fucking sense. That was like shot like A24 films to me, especially the horror movies, are like if somebody with like ADHD that didn't take their meds tried to edit a film because it makes no fucking sense. And like it's so like abstract. It's like what I told somebody, it was like A24 does what M. Night Shyamalan tried to do and makes it worse. Like it's just to me, it's mostly like it's just not my thing. Like the witch or Hereditary. Like the best part of Hereditary to me was when she gets her head knocked off by the telephone pole. I paused it. I started dying laughing. I thought it was the funniest fucking thing ever.
The lie,
like,
you're looking
no
at me
way.
with your face, with that face on your face. You don't think that's worthy of like an Oscar? You don't think that's the greatest like line you've ever heard? That's on a golden tablet somewhere.
I'm just like, oh, she's obviously a fucking witch. Like, what? I was like, oh, is this crazy? And then for a witch,
With that
right?
like the taste of butter.
Yeah, here's this crazy family living out in the woods in the 1600s or whatever. Obviously, someone's a witch. It's either going to be one, a metaphor about how religion is bad, or two, the family was right the entire time and she was a witch. Shocker, she was a witch.
Confirmed. Nelson hates art. Nelson just hates art because he doesn't understand it.
That's about womanhood. She's transitioning from girl to woman.
There's so much behind some of these. And because, like, look, you're going to call me terminally online. I know that you are. And if you don't do it, you're going to be thinking it the entire time. But you have to understand that when it comes to these movies, there are people who are talking about experiences that you have not and will not ever have.
I hate A24 fans.
Drinking the period blood was a little far in Midsummer. I will admit.
I haven't seen Midsummer. Okay, I'm going off The Witch, Hereditary, and there was something else I watched. A24 horror. I tried to give it a thing. I was just like, third time is just like, I can't do it with these horror films. They're just so bad.
You also have like zero like attention span. So anything that's any kind of a slow burn, like you're not going to be interested in it.
I'm like, oh my God. But like, I think we can all agree that people who make A24 their personality 9 times out of 10 are really
yes, because we know a specific one. Yes.
But like, even before that, I was just never a fan of A24. I just can't get into it. It's like one of those things, like I just can't get into any of their movies. It's just like intense music, close-up shot of person's face, back off, intense music, random scene, intense music, something else happened, a metaphor for life, blah, blah, blah.
I need to show you what an actual bad movie is. And by that, I mean, I'm going to go to your house and we're going to load up Amazon Prime and we're just going to search horror and we're going to scroll to the bottom. And whatever that movie is, that is an actual bad horror movie. And I can say that because I spend my whole summers watching the worst self-published horror movies that have ever existed. My favorite one, hold on. My favorite one was this one that was supposed to be like a haunted house movie where it was supposed to be like the typical, like whole bunch of people are staying at this haunted house and like they get picked off one by one. But this was a quote. Okay, so sex work is work. However, what we're talking about in this part is that this is a quote unquote legit horror movie, as in it's not like a softcore porn or anything, but they had hired all adult film actors. Oh my God. Y'all have never seen anything like it.
Whether it's just like the opening scene of one like over and over again for the whole movie. Like just like
it's the quality, like adult film actors probably can act if they're given direction to act, but nobody was directing them to act, so it was that feel of adult film acting the entire time, and the costumes and the way that like this is a horror movie, and you know it's a horror movie because they put a green gel over the lighting, like that's the whole thing. Like, that is a bad movie. Okay, we will talk about this later one day.
It sounds like an A24 film. My friends and I rented like every single zombie movie from our local Blockbuster like when we were in high school, and one of the worst ones we watched was Zombie Strippers. But then
okay, Mark, go ahead and finish.
Got, like, Troll 2.
Yeah, would you like the rest of my answer?
Was it Jenna Jameson did that one, or Pamela Lee Anderson?
It was someone. It was just absolutely like, what the fuck is going on?
I remember they were talking about it on the radio with her, whoever was in it. I'm like, it's like, it's a very political movie, and it talks. I was like,
how men turned into zombies, but women could carry the virus and infect people, but men turned into zombies, and it was like a kind of like a bad
like a
Dusk
STD.
Till Dawn. Yeah, it was like something like a From Dusk Till Dawn type deal with a strip club. Anyway, sorry, Mark. What were you? Tusk?
Well, that's like what I don't like. I don't like the going out of its way to be like gross and edgy on purpose.
Right.
No entertainment. No whatever.
Well,
but what I do enjoy is stuff like I've seen Poltergeist so many times. Like even when that is probably my favorite one. And then I like Alien, but I hate like other outer space like kind of movies.
Nano.
Like I don't know.
You said Alien, and Nelson went to the sound that Mork made from Mork and Mindy, like a. So outer space makes you uncomfortable. Is that what you're saying?
It does, and so does the ocean.
Oh yeah,
just like the vastness and like emptiness is what, especially if it's a space movie or a deep sea movie where like there's like a pressure break and you can see like the metal start to like twist.
Ocean Gate.
Like the water rushes in.
Submarine.
Well, to be fair, they didn't see the crumpling.
It just crumbles.
Yeah, it just happened.
I
mean, that's like the best case scenario if you're going to be in that. Or there's like a space movie, I don't remember what it was, but like they did like a gravity jump, and when they got to like where they were, like somebody was like in the wall, like still alive because like their atoms got rearranged.
Yeah.
Like that kind of, I don't know. Like I like a good monster movie, but that like really unsettles me with the like, I don't know, like the unknown science of that kind of thing. But body horror bad.
I do agree with you there, Mark. I agree with you 100%.
Creaking metal noises in like a spaceship somewhere, still bad, but I can be like enjoyably scared by.
I wish I could remember the specific TikToker, but there was a TikToker that I started seeing recently who was talking about like the way that like those gross for gross sake horror movies are kind of bankrupt. Like there's nothing to them. Like, oh, you know, like eating somebody's shit because your mouth is sewn to their ass is bad. Like, where's the social commentary in this?
Right.
Like, where's the base to this? I wish I could remember who that was.
We're all the last person in the centipede, brother. Like,
it's
the centipede is capitalism.
Yes.
The 1% at the front.
I was going to say that Jaws was apparently Fidel Castro's favorite movie. He loved it. Yeah.
All right, Kai, what we got? The worst punchline for like trickle down economics with that
movie. Okay, wow. Mark, you're muted now. Mark is muted in timeout. Mark is in timeout. Kai, what do we got?
We need to talk about the fact that I had never watched Jaws, and during this trip that we were talking about, you and I, when we were sitting in your car for 4 hours, I said I'd never watched Jaws, so you brought up that monologue and made me watch it, and I was so uncomfortable because I knew I was going to be so scared listening to it.
About the USS Indianapolis.
I hated that. Not like it's not. I'd say that not because like you're terrible for showing it to me. It's not. It's. This is not an interpersonal thing. It was all because I haven't watched that movie because I knew it was going to be so uncomfortable and scary for me. And then we watched that. I'm like, yep, fear's confirmed. Not gonna watch it.
We're all rooting for the shark. Was as Mark says, and you say the shark was there first. The humans are in
house.
It's the shark's house.
He barges into the shark's house unannounced.
Okay, so this term, I think it's overused, and when I say it, I think a lot of people are going to be turned off immediately, but I think it does kind of fit. It's the concept of cozy horror. So when you have things like The Conjuring and Annabelle and pretty much any of James Wan's other movies, anything that he's touched and made, where it's kind of like there's definitely like bad shit happening, but you're relatively sure that there's going to be at least an 80% good ending at the end of it, and that the horror is kind of contained. It's a contained kind of horror. So I really like a very traditional haunted house. I like ghosts. I like poltergeist. I like demon kind of things, like that kind of stuff. But I have spent a lot of time, like I was just saying, watching whatever random horror movie I could find. Like on Netflix over here, you get a lot of European, like very, very low budget European horror movies that just get shoved onto Netflix into Amazon Prime and that nobody sees. So I've watched I've watched Spanish horror, I've watched Irish horror, I've seen some French horror. And none of it has a lot of money. Most of them aren't very. No, we're not going to Serbian film. Fuck off with that. But it's very like low budget. They're not very good. The storylines are very samey. And because found footage movies are so cheap to make, almost all of them are found footage movies. But with those, like, it's a different feeling of like self-contained horror that like you cannot suspend your disbelief long enough to go like, oh, this is actually scaring me because it's so bad. It's so bad looking. But I still need that level of assurance that like, yeah, this can't get so far that it will scare me properly because I get the feeling of realness. I am definitely terrified of things that feel too real. I can never make myself watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Cannot. Okay. And things like The Purge. That's probably like horror action, maybe more horror than action, but The Purge scares me because there are people who actually think like that.
They're waiting for it.
Who want that. Yeah, especially as politics are changing as we age, like people are wanting that specific thing to happen. Can't watch The Purge because it's too scary. A lot of the slashers that are real feeling, can't watch them. And it's only fairly recently that I've been able to watch older slashers, 80s slashers, because I have a level of detachedness from it. I can make myself sit down and watch it and feel like, okay, I am not the one who's being chased, therefore I can watch this now. But yeah, I was excited about this conversation because I do want to think about that it's almost like an exposure therapy when it comes to horror, that you can deal with your fears, that you can deal with very, very basic primal fears as well as more societally based fears through horror, that you can kind of, it's a therapy that you can go through those motions and kind of process it in a safe way through horror movies. I'm also a big horror reader, so I do it through books as well. Like you can process it, you can see how they exist through the lens of somebody else's eyes and not necessarily your own at that point. And it's there's a lot of people that I know who have been through a lot of interpersonal trauma, things that were done to them, and ways that they've grown up where they have dealt with a lot of trauma. And it's a lot of those people who have a lot of trauma who like horror the most.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting theory watching these people who are basically able to go through their own trauma or process a bit of their trauma through watching horror, reading horror, listening to horror podcasts. That is kind of microdosing the therapy for it. And I don't know where I necessarily want to go with that, but like it's so interesting to me to see that happen. And yeah, that's my favorite. That's my favorite part.
That was beautiful.
Okay, Nelson.
All right, so kind of I want to touch on what Don said a bit, and Mark watched this film too. How Don mentioned that like actual like movies that were not like are based in history but weren't supposed to come off as horror can be just as scary, if not scarier, than like the stuff that's meant to be horror. And the Soviet classic Come and See, I think, fits into that, because it wasn't supposed to be a horror movie. It was supposed to be a movie about the atrocities committed in Belarus by the Nazis on the Eastern Front. But it's shot in such a way, and it's done in such a way that it is, in fact, a horror movie. Like, it is terrifying, the stuff that they portray, and like the actors' faces and how it's shot with just all natural lighting. And even though you have to read subtitles unless you know Russian or German, the feeling, like the music and the way that the actors look and the way that the main character, who is like probably supposed to be like 14, 15, maybe even 13, 14, 15, like while he's fighting, at the beginning he looks like, a kid, and then by the end of the movie he is weathered. He is like a weathered old man looking, because he's seen so much horror and atrocities and the things that happened, the atrocities the Nazis committed. And then when you see certain scenes, like when they throw the people in the barn, Nazis lock the barn and set it on fire. And when you see like the Mark and I do kind of joke about the scene where like the one guy's like, you shouldn't have digged. I told you not to dig. And this plane that you see is a reconnaissance plane. Like he sees them digging up old weapons and trying to arm the resistance. And like that plane is like an ever present figure in the movie. And it's just like how it observes everything, like the outside observer and like all this other stuff you're getting at.
Right.
But like the movie is like, it's free on YouTube, anyone to watch it, but it's been described, and I think this is how it is. It's a fever dream from hell, because like it is so just disturbing. And the fact that stuff happened, it's one of those things where like in the ending, it's another thing about the ending is not happy. It's just like, oh, the ending is just like, he finds his resistance group and just falls back in line, and they got to go off to keep fighting the Nazis. It's just like it's continuous horror. It just the anxiety that is built up in you through the entire film. Like you feel it from this teenager fighting in the Belarusian resistance against the partisans against the Nazis. Like you feel it constantly throughout the film with the music in his face. Even though, like I said, you don't understand a damn thing this kid's saying unless you are fluent in Russian. It's shot in a way that you're there almost, but it is so abstract. It's like what A24 tries to be. It's like it's so intense with everything and how it's shot and everything about it that it's just like, holy shit. Like after you watch it, you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? And you think about, holy shit, this shit actually did happen. And it's one of those things like the movie that was supposed to be just a historical like war movie that the Soviets made in like the 80s is probably it goes down as like one of the best horror movies of all time. Another one, and a genre that of horror, well, not to even sidetrack, I do love zombie movies. I absolutely love one of my favorite, Night of the Living Dead, one of my favorite spin-off is Shaun of the Dead. I love Shaun of the Dead. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Zombie movies to me are great. I actually did a project in college, like breaking down the different types of zombies and different types of zombie movies. Probably one of my favorite zombie movies is The Crazies, because it is something I was just like, holy shit, that could happen. How like a government plane crashed, or like an agent, like a some sort of biological thing, it got in the water supply, and in this town, the government shuts it down, all this shit happens, and like people just start turning on each other, etc. I was like, damn, that's crazy. Like how many times has the government lost shit like this? They almost nuked North Carolina because of a massive nuclear warhead fell out of this plane when it crashed. I was like, oh, what like this could happen. But I think a genre that, and an aspect of horror that scares the shit out of people. One of my favorite horror movies of all time, not the sequel. The sequel sucked, but the first Sinister with Ethan Hawke, to me, was really, really good. And it's really good for the same reason that like Children of the Corn, like I like Children of the Corn, like tried to be good, right? And probably why the book is good, maybe not so much the movie, is because it involves children, but it involves children hurting adults because it goes against the entire notion of like childhood innocence. Because you have whether it's Children of the Corn, the He Who Walks Amongst the Rows, this paranormal thing, this outside force, or Dragul or whatever, this ancient deity that's getting children to kill their parents. And that goes against, like I said, the entire notion of childhood innocence. And on top of that, what makes Sinister even worse, it talks about like your actual children killing their parents. And it kind of like hops on like a Menendez style thing, like something that wasn't supposed to happen. Like when children kill their parents, it's always very graphic. There's always something very disturbing behind it. And the way that it goes about doing that in Sinister is sinister. Like you have an outside force that these parents can't control, that they unintentionally brought into the house, is getting their children to kill them in the most horrific, brutal ways. Like that opening scene in Sinister where you see the family like standing on the tree branch, and you see something cutting away the tree, and all of a sudden it breaks, and the family all gets hung at one point in the next break. And then you have the kids like just slowly, because they've seen this demonic deity. Like my friend Tony, he's one of those people that I would go see horror movies with him. He's one of those people that's like doesn't flinch at anything. He like laughs. He like never. He'd always make fun of me for jumping, whatever. The only horror movie that I've ever seen him just go like, "Oh shit," was Sinister, and it's the scene where like you've seen the home footage, and they're on the riding lawnmower. All of a sudden, the kid runs over his dad with the riding lawnmower and the blades and everything going off. And I really think that movie and Children of the Corn and movies like that, where you take children that are supposed to be innocent and have them do extremely disturbing things. Like not only one is it just scary in and of itself because people are getting killed in brutal ways, but it's people who are supposed to be innocent doing things that you only truly like you see adults do, and it in the most horrific, disturbing way. And that's why I think Sinister really hit home on that better than Children of the Corn. But anytime a movie has children doing things that we only assign to adults in horror movies is something that adds another level of disturbing to it. So yeah, that's why I think Sinister is a really good movie.
I want to know what you guys think of the fact that for modern audiences, when we look back at older horror movies, we don't find them scary anymore, except in very rare cases. Some can make that leap and still be like, I find the Jack Nicholson Shining terrifying, and it's all because of him. Like it's all Jack Nicholson that makes that movie terrifying to me. But there are some that can make that leap, but it's very few and far between. And it's like almost no other genre seems to have this difficulty of making the time jump. So I want to know what you guys think of this. I would like to hear what Don has to say first. Shut up, Nelson.
Go Don.
Well, I think one of those things is we rewatch some of the older stuff, partially because of nostalgia, partially because of comfort. You know when the jumps are, you know when stuff is going to happen, you know who the bad guy is if there's a twist. I think because, oh God, I'm going to use this term and I hate this term. I think because there's been such a search for elevated horror, that those who are making slashers or paranormal movies or body horror or anything that you know, creature features, stuff like that, they're looking for something that is not necessarily more complicated, but a new way to, I guess, get people fearful. they might break away from that timing of, okay, it's clear from the music something's going to happen, or here's a red herring, but we're going to make it really obvious that they're a red herring, so you don't think that they're the bad guy, or that you think they're the bad guy and you don't think this person is. I think the reason why we aren't as fearful of those older movies is because the field has changed so much as far as like the options that you have, the storytelling, the people that are telling those stories are different from the individuals that were telling them prior. Whereas, some people will say Wes Craven, which I'm not going to dispute, but Wes Craven's like the king. George Romero's the king. And then you have new people coming in like James Wan and Jordan Peele that are offering a different thing, where Saw, when it came out in 2002, 2003, shocked the hell out of everybody. Out of everyone who watched it. I'll go back and watch them like, this is the part where they do this with the face. Like if I showed my kid those movies, she would look at them like they're just trying to be gory. And that's the way we would look at it now, as opposed to when the movie was coming out, you had to have that shock value as something different, but it really had something to tell you. It had a story to tell you, which was, here's this guy who's having he's coming to terms with his existence, and in a weird cult-like way, in cult leader-like way, I'm going to teach you guys how to appreciate life. And if you can't get through this trap first, you won't learn the lesson. So get out of the trap, learn the lesson that you should appreciate what you have, and then go on after that. But it's offering you new stuff. Paranormal Activity, the same thing, where you've got new technology. You've got not everything has to be, relying on CGI, but even the practical effects and makeup are. It's no telling. I mean, there's not a quantitative way to say how much better it is, but the makeup and the practical effects are so much better now because time has passed. You have all these previous things that you can look at and study and say, this is what worked and this is what didn't work. Like I didn't really care for it. It was a very divisive movie. You either liked it or you didn't. It's not something I'm going to go back and I'm going to add it to my yearly watches of movies. But Malignant came out last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember.
I think it was 2 years ago. I remember the person that we were talking about. I watched it on stream with him, and we laughed our asses off at the moment that it jumped the shark. It's just so fucking funny.
And that's what I do. I'm like, there was nothing to me was scary about it. I was sitting there laughing, especially when it's revealed like there's somebody inside of her head, and because the whole time,
that one,
the person's going backwards, and I'm looking at my wife watching like maybe she's got like a clone or a twin, or she was an experiment, because that's the same person. They're just going backwards. But apparently the person that it was no CGI to do any of that stuff. So it was all practical effects. And when I went back and watched it again for our show, I looked at it and was like, I'm very impressed, because James Wan, with his way of, what's the term? Playing with the puppet strings. It was an issue of, he's going from all the way back to Saw in dead silence to now play with these strings with you as the audience to guess that the film is going one way when it's going a different way. And then also the way in which the person is kind of suspended when they're doing their attacks and stuff with their hands and doing those. He was basically just doing exercise in puppetry with the whole thing. And it was, I looked at it through that route and I was like, well, that's very inventive. That's new. I still don't love the movie. I'm not somebody who's going to recommend it. But I'm not going to crap on. I mean, I thought it was funny. There were moments where I'm like, there's no way in hell. There's no way in hell.
It had that movie in particular had such a like 2003 aesthetic to it, with the blue and the gray and the green and the leather jacket and the long stringy dark hair and like everything about it just felt like such a throwback to like the dime a dozen horror movies that came out in that era, that like it was fun to sit through that. And the moment when it just went overload and like the person starts moving backwards and like spidering around everything, that was just hilarious. But like for me it's more of an exercise of looking at like, oh, so James Wan really likes movies from like 98 to 2004, right, and they made that movie somehow.
Well, then you had Barbarian that came out last year, I think, on Netflix, and that movie, because I think they did 3 acts. So you have the original, I mean, the initial part where the two people are in the Airbnb together, and you're thinking the movie's going to be about, okay, this guy's got to be a killer, or maybe she's a killer, and then you realize you're completely wrong, because our preconceptions about the darkness and being in that type of area, and because it's a male, and the gender dynamics, as far as you have a guy and a woman, and then you have to also add in that this guy also played Pennywise. So you start thinking like, no, this guy's got to be in on it. He's got to be doing something. And then you get to understanding what the story was, and it had to deal with sexual abuse of women for decades that created this monster, right? Kind of in the same vein as Frankenstein's monster. It's not really the monster. It was created, and it doesn't know anything other than what it has experienced. And the most tragic character in that film is the monster, because she's the, as they say in the film, she's a carbon copy she's a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. So like all her genetic material made her like so different as far as cognitive abilities and size, because she had like a massive size and a lot of strength. And it makes you think about all these secrets, or at least hopefully makes you think about all these secrets in these neighborhoods, in these communities that have persisted. And it all had to deal with, this person was not suspicious to anybody else, so they were able to get away with all the stuff that they were able to get away with. Kidnapping and sexually abusing all these women, and then forcing them to have his children, and then engaging in incestuous relationships with the offspring, and then the offspring of the offspring. And when you see a movie like this, like I think I had my mom watch, she's like, that's unbelievable. That's somebody, Mom, turn on the news. That
actually happened.
Turn on the news. Turn on the news. Like the guy in Cleveland, like he was keeping those 3 women in his house, sexually assaulting them over and over again, had children with them. Then there was one in Germany, a guy, it was the same thing, where like the family was the family that he created was in the basement and never came out of the basement. And no one found out about them, I think, until he died, or somebody eventually came over to the house and found out what was taking place. But that's the scariest thing is people. It's not the monsters.
Man was the monster all along.
Exactly.
Nelson, what were you going to say about why we don't find old movies scary anymore?
So I had an example, like so The Exorcist, right? My mom is a nurse, and she was working at a hospital when that movie came out, and she would say, I remember like watching it for the first time and thinking like, oh, I could see how this could be scary back then. And she was like, yeah, no, you don't understand. Like when it came out, it was like the first of its kind, and people were literally vomiting in the theater and passing out. She was like, we had so many people come into the hospital like from passing out and vomiting and just like hysteria because they saw that film. It was just so groundbreaking. And now when we watch it, like, yeah, there's elements of it that are like, it's fucked, and like I could see how that could be scary back in 1970 whenever it came out. But now we just have that like genre has been beaten to death, that like, oh, the demons in the church. I have a theory, and I don't think I could ever prove this, but it would not shock me if behind all those movies, from The Conjuring, The Exorcist, the Pope's Exorcist, anything dealing with demonic possession is somehow secretly funded by the Catholic Church.
Dude, that's not even like look,
that's not a
the
theory.
Warrens. It's all the Warrens.
Like to get it's somehow like fun. It's like they funnel money into like these films to get people to come back to the church. Like, because all these things are just like massive Catholic guilt. Like, oh my God, demons are real and this shit's true. And then the Warrens are just full of shit. If you actually like go and look them up and see like everything they did, like if you at crack.com had a really good like breakdown of them, like everything that they did was a fraud. Like they were not. They were scam artists. Like it was brilliant. Like none of it was real. And like I know it's
all in the name of Catholicism at the end of the day.
Yeah. I know it's going to be exactly. I know it's going to be a shock to a lot of people probably listening to this, but Annabelle is not haunted. Like Conjuring, all this shit.
She got out of her box.
It's not real.
At one time.
None of that happened. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Look up Ed and Lorraine Warren frauds on Google, and it will have tons of articles proving that they were full of shit. Okay, so sorry, but I think that also touches in such an innate fear of like the world really, because like you have like even if you're not religious, like everyone has grown up for the most part in some sort of religious household, right? So you still have that indoctrination from childhood of some sort of like, even if you don't like, even like just being in Western culture, like anything, but really like religion is there. It's one of those things that's like, it touches into like a, what is out there? Like, what is the afterlife? Right. What is this? Like, could there be like some spooky demonic thing, whatever to do, whatchamacallit? And then people are like, oh, then the people who do go to church, like get sucked into it because like it reinforces their beliefs. And then people who used to be religious or like grew up in religious households and don't believe are like, well, shit. I mean, that is spooky, blah, 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 etc. And the spirituality of it, all this other shit. And then it like transcends, like you have like the Christian demonic thing. Then they finally did the Jewish demonic with the Dybbuk box. And I'm really looking forward to the Iblis, like a jinn, like a fucking like Muslim horror film dealing with demonic possession would be dope. Like hit the 3 major Abrahamic religions, right? That'd be dope. But like they've just been beaten to death. Like with that genre is just so fucking overplayed, but it still holds some weight because people are just like, is it real? Could this happen? They always put that little thing in the beginning. It's like the Catholic Church agree that 99% of demonic possessions are just people with severe mental illness and blah 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 blah. But then here's the 1% that blah 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 blah, right. And it goes into the movie. I think a scary aspect of something that Kai talked about is like not like slasher film, not necessarily the 80s ones, but like the modern, like Strangers, for example. That shit was horrifying because there's no paranormal thing in it whatsoever. It's just people with masks came in, tied up, and fucking killed these people in this house that lived in like a distant suburb, right? And the fact that they put at the beginning, like FBI crime statistics say blah blah blah, violent crimes a year and home invasions, et cetera, and like it's just like fuck, like that. And Hush was another one, was just horrifying because like it is, and not just like it's based like a Strangers type deal, but she's deaf, so you don't really, you have that sense gone. It's just like fuck, it's so intense and crazy, and it's like that could happen. It's like, yeah, people get broken into and killed in their homes sometimes. Like it's just it's what, like that to me seems to be the transition in horror. Is like, granted, you're always going to have like the demonic possession thing, whatever, etc. But it seems like it's kind of transitioning to a lot more, oh shit, this could probably actually happen, like with The Purge, or like Strangers or Hush, or even to an extent like or touching on things that could be paranormal, but like everybody, like It Follows, right? The whole thing where like the demon or that whatever kills premarital sex. Oh my god, you're gonna get killed by this demon. It's gonna follow the ghost STD. Which I saw that movie, I thought it was dumb as shit. But like, I get the premise of why that's scary. Like, I get why. To me, it was just really fucking dumb. And the funniest thing ever was somebody I forgot what it was, an article I was reading, but they was like they combined horror movies, and it was they combined It Follows with Camp Crystal Lake, and basically what happened is the camp counselors had so much sex that the demon just gave up and went into town and set up shop at a coffee shop somewhere and just lived out the rest of his life just relaxing by this coffee shop in town because he just gave up because all the counselors were fucking each other. He lost track of who was gonna kill next. But yeah, I think that like those things really touch on something in our society where it's like religious trauma, with the Exorcist and the Lorraine Warren and all that other demonic possession bullshit, and then transitioning to like, oh fuck, maybe this could actually happen when it comes to things like Hush and Strangers, and even like a taste of like something that could happen, but you throw in that element of just like absolute insanity with like It Follows, that like guys, the STD demon. Like I see like that being like the turning into like that aspect of horror, because people are kind of over the slashers and over the this and over the stuff that scared us before. Now it's just like, oh, and you're probably gonna see stuff like iRobot was ahead of its time, but you're gonna see stuff like, oh, more stuff to deal with like AI and more stuff to deal with Black Mirror type shit as like the futuristic stuff that scares us, because all this stuff's coming in. It's still scary and new, and what could happen if
that's AI... Don't Worry Darling that just came out last year, I think.
Yeah,
very very that.
Yeah, it's just like, ooh, spooky. AI ghosts.
Okay, so people who have listened for a long time, I have to get this out of me or it's going to eat my brain. Who've listened for a long time know that me and the Warrens, we got history, and
they suck.
Okay,
you've got their number.
Yeah, they're dead, and I still got it.
Yeah, we're gonna go do EVP sessions on their grave and tell them they suck and try to get a response.
Look, Kai, I don't want to get you concerned, but as you were talking about the Warrens and you made a comment, one of your plushies like fell over.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's the witch one too. The witch one is the one that fell over. So okay, the Warrens. I don't have any proof for actual money from the church going into making these movies. However, there is a like 99% tie between the church and the Warrens. So the Warrens are kind of the grand parents of the modern idea of what is paranormal, and those modern ideas of what is paranormal, making it into fiction, making it into horror movies as well, making it into horror TV, and also into the way that like true crime exists, the way that quote unquote true horror exists. So your ghost hunting TV shows and things like that, things that are reality, quote unquote, but are fictionalized still. So almost all of these ideas you can trace back to exactly when the Warrens started espousing them. And the Warrens did this in the name of Catholicism. I wouldn't doubt that the church was paying them for all of this. And if they didn't pay them with money specifically, they definitely paid them with exposure, with elevating them within the church. So Ed Warren was one of the first people who has ever ordained a non-priest exorcist. He could do exorcisms even though he was not ordained as a priest. And you know that the church had something to do with this. The church, quote unquote, trusted them enough to send them in as their ghostbusters to reignite the feelings of having demons in the world. And the way that the idea of demons kind of resurrected in the 70s after they were starting, the idea of demons was dying out. And in the 70s, they started resurrecting at exactly the time that the Warrens started doing these high profile cases. And the Warrens would very rarely walk into a house and say, oh, there's nothing, or, oh, it's a ghost. It was always demons. Mm-hmm. And everybody who's created things based on that since then, so especially Ghost Adventures, the ones that I always talk about with Zach Bagans, the way that like everything that just copied that format into the 90s after like Ed Warren died and Lorraine Warren was just kind of an old person who's doing talking head pieces in the 90s when this huge resurgence was coming on TV. That these ideas that they espoused were the ones that were being peddled on TV. So things like having scratch marks in three scratch marks because it's a mocking of the Trinity. No, unless you are in the Catholic Church, you cannot pull that idea out of your ass. How is 3 scratch marks a mocking of the Trinity? Who even comes up with that? The idea that it's always demons, and the way that you get rid of the demons is by following the tenets of Catholicism. That's always how you end up fixing this, no matter what religion the family was to begin with, or if they were non-religious or anything. Most of the time, if you look into these cases, the people that become the large-scale cases were nominally Catholic, lapsed Catholics, or practicing Catholics. It was always that funneling, and that created this media empire. Basically, they created the ideas that everybody who started in TV and then the movies started creating. And that's why, like, when I say that what I like is The Conjuring, and I like The Conjuring, I like Annabelle, I like The Nun, I like all of those Conjuring verse movies. They are based in a cozy horror because it is self-contained. It begins and ends with Catholicism, and Catholicism has the answer to fix all of it. It will be solved, or at least mostly solved by the end of the movie. And I understand what you're talking about, Nelson, but I did not grow up in a religious household. I grew up as least religious as you could possibly be in the United States, even knowing that my grandmother grew up Catholic and my mother grew up at least somewhat Catholic when she was very little. I was not really exposed to religion until I decided to look into it when I was in my early teens. So, like, I did not have that Catholic guilt hanging over me. I had almost no idea about it, but I was still drawn to spooky things as a child and into my teen years and going forward. And you know what really lends itself to being spooky is Catholicism. Mm-hmm. There's bones everywhere. There's blood everywhere. There's death. There's beheading. There's stonings. There's really creepy, dark, cold imagery in churches and in cathedrals. And it really lends itself to a horror setting. And whether the horror settings that we have come from Catholicism, or if Catholicism really lends itself to horror, you almost can't pull it apart by now.
It pulled you in. They got you, Kai.
But saying that, like, I am not Catholic. I am actively anti-Catholic most of the time. I've come after the Catholic Church on this show multiple times, and yet it is the Catholic-based horror that is the ones that I like the most, because they have answers at the end of the day. It's like, I wish I could write a thesis on this. It's so juicy. There's so much here for it.
And it's an extra layer for you being indigenous too. It's just like everything,
right? Yeah.
Like it's just like the actual horror, that generational trauma of the Catholic Church on top of it all. It's just like
I have family members who are personally, like, raise your hand if you're personally victimized by the Catholic Church. Yes, my family does have personal victimization from the Catholic Church, and I wasn't even aware of it until after I became a horror fan.
Dun dun dun. The church knew though, Kai, and it pulled you
the whole time. The whole time.
What was that like tweet where it was like they really popped off with like the crosses because of like the vampire aesthetic? Is just like copied over.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not even getting talk about vampire movies. Oh my god.
Well, it depends on where you fall in vampire movies. If you just want a romance with some sharp teeth, then maybe your films are a little bankrupt.
That one vampire movie, was it 30 Days a Night? That was pretty creepy. I'm not gonna lie, that was disturbing.
You've got kind of like OG horror movies with like Nosferatu. Like, vampires are old school.
I was just hoping you weren't going to mention anything about sparkling vampires. I was
like, oh god,
wrong show.
It's so funny when like she walks in front of that fan and he like holds like his nose shut. Like,
oh god, she smells so bad.
White people still don't bathe.
There is some genuine horror in that when she gets pregnant, it's a vampire baby, and the baby is sucking the life out of her, and she basically dies to get.
That's all.
And she kicks, and like, you can see like its whole like.
She has to carry that vampire baby to term.
Of course, because the writer, fucking what's her name, whatever her name is Mormon. So there's no abortion here.
Again, you pull the sheet back off the Scooby-Doo villain, and it's religion again.
Yes, it is.
It all goes back to 9/11,
and it's all you know. She's willing to die for her baby and for her man because the writer is Mormon and there's no abortion in this universe. But but the
But there is
almighty
a
power,
Confederate vampire.
the almighty power of fucking vampirism god comes down and saves her.
Yeah,
Battle scars.
that's fucking Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham's a Confederate vampire.
Why did she just go for fucking Stephanie Meyer? Why did Stephanie Meyer not just go for having like a Nazi vampire as well? Like we're going for this. Right? Let's have this go.
We already had the Nazi vampires in What We Do in the Shadows, so
yeah.
Oh man.
Oh, my God.
Which is a much higher quality vampire movie than any of the Twilight ones.
And we got Nazi zombies and blood and reds and was it Blood Snow or Red Snow? I forgot what it was.
Oh,
Dead Snow.
Dead
that
Snow.
Was it. Dead Snow. Yeah.
Mm.
I will say that one of the scariest things in the horror genre that I experienced was not a movie, but it was the video game Dead Space, and that goes back to what Mark was talking about outer space. Like to me, that game, the third one sucked, but the first and second one were probably better than a lot of horror movies that I've ever watched. Like that whole suspense and the storyline and the imagery and the whole idea of like being alone in space, and then there's this like
you don't have any control, and it's just you.
It's just you in space, and these fucking, and you're having this thing, and you have religious trauma, you have aliens, you have you're lost in space, and you have your dead girlfriend that you don't know if it's a ghost or if it's the cube fucking the tower messing with you in your head. You keep seeing flashbacks from her, and you don't know if you turn this corner, what the fuck's gonna be there. And then you have like dead baby aliens with tentacles running around. It's fucking wild. So like that was also horrifying. I was a video game that I don't know if they ever tried to make that a movie. Would it work? But that the writing and the imagery and everything about that was horrifying. But
we'll have to come back to video games on a different episode because I got feelings about that Resident Evil 7, the Biohazard one. Where they're like in a swamp.
Video games.
Yeah.
We can get into Alien Isolation, and we can get into Resident Evil.
Ooh, spooky.
So what else are we talking about tonight? Donald, you got anything you want to talk about?
The question.
Oh, Mark,
answer the question. Did you order the code red?
So are you collected? Are you calm, cool, and collected?
Tom Cruise is just scary in any movie.
Those cold dead eyes like a doll's eyes.
Scientology is the one
right before he jumps on a couch.
It's Tom Cruise's middle tooth. It's the horror of Tom Cruise's middle tooth.
Stop
the middle incisor. The show is brought to you by Tom Cruise's third incisor. But I think it's like partially like the being desensitized to it or whatever, because like being born, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the year I was born, 98.
Tiny child.
Like I was exposed to like the original It, Chucky, all of that, and like just I enjoy like the campiness of them, and like what was it? I was thinking about Leprechaun like earlier, like where it was just like, oh, it's a leprechaun, but he's evil, and he'll get this young attractive woman.
The hood.
Yeah,
right.
Got the hood.
Right. There's that genre.
Welcome to
hell. But like I think it has to move towards the realistic, and like how we mentioned Black Mirror and like the Love, Death, and Robots kind of thing, and like the shorts where it's like, of course it takes place in space because that's where our course is headed with destroying the planet, whatever. Like I can't remember if it's called Mother or if it's just the character's name's Mother, but there's a science fiction movie which has like horror elements with it, which this little girl, like a human girl, is raised by this, like, I think it's like a spaceship, but it has like a part of it where it kind of comes out as like a robot. And it's like, oh, well, this is what, like, this, you learned language, you learned math, and like you're growing up
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. Because I don't think like people in my generation are really scared of movies. Like, we like the campy ones for fun, like the Dale and Tucker versus Evil kind of thing.
Right.
It's fun.
I love that movie so much.
And like I really like Army of Darkness, like
Mhm.
the campiness of that. And just what's the oh my gosh, is the movie called Tromaville? Oh, the Toxic Avenger,
Yeah.
which did not age well whatsoever. For the record, I'm not saying it's a great movie, but just like that, like weird, like absurdity or whatever is like almost like lovable now, I think. But then when you get into things like I didn't really enjoy Unfriended, but I can get why to like a younger not to make ooh spooky, we're in a Zoom call. But like
Wait.
you know,
I get
like
pulled
to
away.
people younger, like I think people who are in their late teens, early 20s now.
Oh no.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
Nelson, shut up.
It's like they're together, but they're also like isolated. Like they're helplessly watching each other, and like it's about like I think it's spoilers for this movie that's not scary or good. I think they like bullied like some girl to like you know take matters into her own hands,
Oh
and
my
like
God.
I didn't but it like bounces like around, and like they're guilty of like doing something wrong, and they are together with their friends on the call, but they're helpless to stop anything from happening because they're all in their own separate houses. Is like the, oh well, I'm alone next, and oh, there was like a sound behind me. I'm like, it's like now it's my turn to be hard. Like that kind of thing is scarier than just like, oh yeah, there's a guy outside with a chainsaw. Like in the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was like a part of it. Like he goes on the bus and everyone like
I was
pulls
filming him
their
like they're
phone
all.
out.
Oh
Yeah, like no
yeah,
one
I forgot
cares.
about that. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and then
Forgot about
in the
that part.
beginning of that, it's like these teens from the city, and there's this man minding his own business, getting gas in the town he lives in. They're like, "Look at this hillbilly. We better stay." Like but he's just like some guy that lives in the town, and he like ends up helping them
Yeah.
when
They're like, oh, look at the
they
verbal
don't
flag on
belong
the
there,
thing.
and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
like, yeah.
I
But
think the
everyone like for
Unfriended.
sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I think
With
that Unfriended is the one for the current generation that is going to age the way that the ones that I remember from the mid 2000s, like my teenage years, those are aged to the point of goofiness now. I think Unfriended is the kind of movie that's going to age to the point of goofiness for when Gen Z is in their 30s, the way that I am now, because it's so of its time. Like I could see that storyline happening in an earlier online age, chat room kind of age.
Yeah.
I could see that same storyline happening in chat room age, and it would still age weirdly because the technology is going to change, and the way that we view technology and interact with technology is going to change to make that movie feel goofy as decades start to pile onto it. But the reason why I asked the question in the first place, like why do we not respond to old horror, is because when I do find those ones that are outliers, like for me, The Shining, and there's a couple like genuinely like black and white era movies, like Gaslight is pretty scary, and oh God, what's the other? Was it original House on Haunted Hill, like the original one? Like they can be. I'm sorry.
I said
Was
with
that?
Vincent Price.
I'm sorry, my camera just went. is that the one that I'm thinking of? Is that the black and white one?
Yes.
Maybe it's that one. I can remember like scenes from it, but there's a couple that like I can look at. Like I already like old movies, and I am definitely in the minority when it comes to old movies because a lot of people don't like them. But like when I find those few that can still like have a scary moment in them, a lot of the times what I actually find scary again is not relying on the effects, even practical effects being from the time that they're in. It's usually like a singular actor who is just terrifying in the way that they move and the way that they speak and everything. That are, I think that as we get better at, well, maybe not even get better considering how studios are paying their effects artists, but as we continue to grow with effects in movies, we're going to be looking back. Like we've seen it with Paranormal Activity. If you look at Paranormal Activity now, you can see the cracks in the effects, and it's going to change over. So is horror really only dependent on effects, or like, are we going to see singular actors, singular like gritty realism? Like I said, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I can't watch it because it's too real.
Yeah.
Like it's so gritty and greasy.
Like, you know how like the CGI effects, I wonder if that's going to be more rare for the actor to really be immersive now. If it's just like, okay, we have this one actor in the room, this tennis ball is the monster, act afraid of it.
Yeah.
Versus, okay, we have you in a full set, you're in full costume, here's your other co-workers, the other actors on here. This is the premise, get each other into it.
And the bodies that are in the pool are actual real skeletons.
Right, yeah. We won't mention that though. It'll be all right.
Yeah, like it does, as a horror reader, maybe I'm more primed to be prepared to like I'm prepared for a movie to not be dependent on effects, because when you're a horror reader, you have to like,
right, you make the effects.
You have to make it.
Yeah.
So it's just something that makes me curious about the future of horror, and how every generation has seen like, oh well, this is the scariest the horror has ever been, and it's so depraved, and how can we ever get past this? And then 3 years later there's going to be something that's, how can we get more depraved than this one? How can it be like the way that we felt about Paranormal Activity? Like Paranormal Activity is the scariest thing that's ever happened, and then here we are now going like, oh, it's kind of goofy.
Right, with the connects where you see like the little guy. Like yeah,
we're gonna have a mainstream snuff film. That's the next thing. That's the final frontier. It's a Serbian film, but it's actually a snuff film in mainstream.
If somebody brings up,
just put on a watch list.
If somebody brings up a Serbian film, American History X, Human Centipede, there's some others that came out around the same period. If anybody brings those up,
Cannibal Holocaust
is
yes.
Is me.
Put American History X in the same genre of those horrible movies.
No, maybe that's not the one I'm thinking of. What's the one? No, I'm not even gonna bring it up because I know the storyline is so fucked. I might be wrong about that one, thinking of a different movie and put the wrong title on it. But if anybody brings these up and you're dating and you're young, if anybody brings these up, run. Don't date this person.
Hostel too. I hated that movie.
They're not
Hostel.
Yeah, and
they're not the cool like indie filmmaker kind of person. They're not the cool person who knows a lot about movies. No, that's a red flag. Get out.
Yeah.
They're just on Reddit.
If right after they say a Serbian film, they don't say this is a fucking horrible thing that never should have happened, run.
Yeah, they definitely should be on a watch list. Because I'm glad you brought up Hostel, because Kai, as you were saying, this idea of the grittiness, the reality, whatever. That was kind of one of the complaints with the Saw franchise early on, and also the Hostel franchise, even though it was only 2 movies. But the idea that you have to be as gross as possible, like we gotta scare the shit out of you. Like when Interview with the Vampire came out, as well as a lot of other movies prior and even after, there was that whole thing of like, oh my God, there's so much blood in this movie, or there's so much gore in this movie, that people were being shuttled out. They were being carried out on gurneys. They were going hospitals. I'm sorry, ambulances were being called to theaters, and CPR was, this sensationalism behind the film. Like, it's so scary, it's so gross, it's whatever. And because those have been the way that these movies have been marketed, whether it was by the studio or just by social media nowadays, we go in with high expectations so that when something doesn't happen, as far as something really grotesque or whatever, we're disappointed, because you already had movies like Saw and Hostel. Like, the knobs at 10, they're going to 12, with the way in which you basically you have torture porn is really all it is.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like fucking Cannibal
Rob
Holocaust.
Zombie.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Like, Hostel, there was nothing I learned from Hostel. Saw, I could see the discussion that's taking place, but Hostel, I don't know what Eli Roth. Nothing against him, but I don't know what he was trying to push out there as a message.
Don't go to Eastern Europe. That's probably his.
Well, I mean, that was
message.
probably it. Yeah, don't
Now-
trust these random women that walk up to you and are interested in you just for no reason.
Yeah. And now it'd probably get into something like fucking what's that? The Sound of Freedom, human trafficking. Like now would be
God.
in that genre of bullshit. But like Mark, fucking Rob Zombie films. Oh my god. That's not even like the Halloween. His Halloween fucking move. Let's just set those aside as just don't watch those. Like, but the fucking like House of 1,000 Corpses. And what was the other one? Devil's Rejects.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
then the one he made where it was like a weird underground fight ring, but it was like everyone had like their own edgy like theme. I can't remember what it was called. It was like 13 something, or I don't know. It was bad.
There was House of 1,000 Corpses, Devil's Rejects, and then there was
the one they just made where they like go to Mexico.
Yeah, they survived the end of fucking Devil's Rejects somehow. But yeah, I mean,
to Salem, 3 from Hell, House of 1,000 Corpses.
Yeah, so it's like there's scenes in there that are funny, like the shit with Captain Spaulding, like when he says like, "Are you just call me a chicken fucker?" Like, and I'm some super secret, superficial clown business that blah. Like there's moments of like, haha, to break from the just overwhelming just violence. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, being a teenager watching them, like, oh, this is woo, but then like, now you watch it, it's just like, now it's just like, holy shit, this is fucking stupid. It's like, was it? Did he? What was the? He did the Hills Have Eyes remake too, didn't he?
I have no clue.
No, he didn't do that one. The one like early 2000s. No.
Yeah, I remember watching the Hills Have Eyes remake too, and I was just like, "Fuck, this is fucking wild." But then, like, it had that aspect of the very beginning. They're like, it has a kernel of truth with the nuclear test sites, Los Alamos, all this stuff, and it's like some people refuse to leave, and this is what happened to them. And then, but then it also gets into the ableism that you talked about, Don, like with the whole like, oh, they're mutants and they have to be scary because they're mutants, right? But I haven't seen the original Hills Have Eyes with what's his face, that famous actor that
Michael
was
Berryman.
that's typecast in those roles. But I just remember the overt gore of like those movies is just like Cannibal Holocaust. What was it? Didn't they Green Inferno?
Bad too.
That was it. Because they're like aren't they the same? Wasn't it one the remake of
they're pretty much the same movie.
Yeah. And they're fucking racist as shit. Like on top of that, like, oh, the natives
look at
are
all
gonna
these,
eat you.
These indigenous people are gonna
kill you and eat you. Blah, 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 blah,
yeah.
It's like, shut the fuck up.
Well, now I am.
Yeah, don't fly over this unknown part of South America.
Well, if I go missing, it's because Mark and Kai killed me and ate me, y'all. There you go. That's it. The indigenous people ate the white man. Booga booga booga.
The only message I would say, if anybody ever said, well, if I'm not going to watch Cannibal Holocaust, is there something I can learn from it? I would say, yeah, there's something you can learn from it, which is it's not the indigenous communities. I mean, when you start thinking about lens, because the way that, this production team goes down there and they go missing. So the people are thinking like, oh my gosh, these indigenous people, these primitive people must have done something to them. And that sense of ethnocentrism of like, no, it couldn't have been our guys who did something wrong. it had to have been those people. And when they finally get the information, it's kind of like, we're not going to show this to anybody. We're not going to let anybody know what happened. And I'm just thinking, like, you're just as bad because you're not acknowledging that it was your guys that went down there, and then the people retaliated because of the sexual abuse, the abuse of the animals, all the stuff that was going on. And it was, I mean, it's like scripted reality television now, where I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about this group over here, but I'm going to throw something in to create controversy or to get them talking or get something going to where I can make money off of it, to where we can all look at it and say, look at these weird, strange people that are different than us, and look at how they behave. Which that I always counter them with the article, the body ritual of the Nasarima, where people start reading it and they're like, oh my God, these people are so backwards. They're so backwards. They're so horrible. They're this, they're this. I'm like, they're talking about you. They're talking about Americans. Flip the word around. You know, this they regard pregnant women and the temples that people are supposed to be going to and medical care and all these things. I'm like, you got to realize that when you're looking at things from your lens and you're trying to look at another culture and you're basing them off of whatever your expectations are, whatever your norms and mores are, you're going to go ahead and degrade them. And the sooner you realize that you need to look at them as people and look at their culture, learn it so you can understand what makes them tick, as opposed to we're better than them because we have technology. And I brought this up, or I'm sorry, I didn't bring this up. This is something I want to bring up in my classes going forward, because whenever there's a discussion about colonization and imperialism, the Ben Shapiros and the Jordan Petersons of the world, and the Charlie Kirk, the guy whose his face is too small for his head.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember where they will make this argument like, oh, the West did this, the West did this, that, you know, the West brought roads and trains and ports, and they always avoid having the discussion that the French, the Germans, the British, the Americans, everyone else who's involved in some type of imperialism or neo-imperialism, it wasn't about improving that area. It was about building all that stuff to extract stuff. So yeah, we're gonna build roads and trains and all this other stuff because there's something there that we want, and we want to make it easier for us to get as much of we can in a short amount of time. And it was never like a benevolent thing. So I mean, that's what I would be able to teach from Cannibal Holocaust without showing it. I would just simply say, this is what it looks like.
Here's some tastefully edited scenes of this horrible fucking movie.
Like 10 seconds.
That is by far one of the movies that came close to, well, no, maybe physically ill. It came close to making me purge. But
I'll straight up say I fainted during it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. It was one of those they go to cut it. They show them cutting his face off from like your perspective, right? And I thought it was fun. I was watching with some friends, and all of a sudden, like, I get the tunnel vision, and I like, and then I like right when it happened,
like
I
in House
woke
of
up.
Wax.
Yeah, I was just like tunnel vision, and then I like came to, and they were like looking at me like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, why do I feel so sick and clammy, and why am I so sweaty? It's like I fainted. I was struck with the vapors. I do
Not
declare.
again.
Was there a couch that you were able to faint onto?
During this film, I just felt so. Oh my heavens, and I fainted.
Oh my!
That was the only time I ever was like watching a horror movie and was just like, I don't know what happened. I was like 18. All of a sudden, it's just like done.
You just had low blood sugar. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're all right. You haven't had anything to eat today. You'll be all right.
Yeah, bro. It was like,
This is why you're supposed to buy the 40 ounces of Coke that are at the front.
Real quick, what do we think about remakes? One that comes to mind is John Carpenter's The Thing, right? So like the original one apparently is really good. and then I don't think I've ever watched the thing all the way through. So like you have the original one that is apparently like a horror sci-fi classic. It's John Carpenter, and then you have like the remake, which I don't know how that turned out or whatever. Like I said, I've never actually watched the thing all the way through, but it seems like you can remake something and make it better. Like was it Mark mentioned Army of Darkness or like Evil Dead, right? Like the original, they were like, it wasn't supposed to be campy, it wasn't supposed to be funny, it was supposed to be a horror movie, but this is the budget we had with the technology back then, and it just came out campy and funny, and we just went with it. Then they remade it, and they're like, this is what we wanted it to be.
Oh yeah, the one that came out like earlier this year.
The one that came out like it
Late
was
last year.
like 2013, 2012, like around there. The Evil Dead. With the, and it was like and then like that whole aspect, like it was so over the top. It was like, this is what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be like gory and scary, et cetera, but this is how we wanted it, but we didn't have the technology and the budget back then. And it's like John Carpenter's a thing. It's just like, yeah, it's good, it's suspenseful, but then when you see the thing, it's just like, oh, it's kind of cheesy when you watch it now. Then the remake was like, well, we can make the thing scary now because we have CGI. So let's see if we can make it better. So it seems like remakes can be good, but they can also be really shitty sometimes.
All right, I got a few because I'm of the opinion that you have to have remakes every so often because you're not dealing with that same audience. So when you talk about, when we talked about it earlier with the aspect of audiences get desensitized to those previous films, like we watch them and it's kind of like it's not that scary. Like I have my kid watch Child's Play, like the first three, and I went after I watched it and I was like, I'm gonna let her watch it. I realized I'm like, there's nothing in this movie that's like way out of, it's cartoon violence at this point. So that being said, I will not let her watch the Child's Play reboot because that one a little dark, a little dark.
Mark it's Chucky, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I break in because I'm breaking from cultural protocol because I should be calling it Chucky, Freddy, Jason,
Michael Myers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those movies. So with Child's Play, when they did the reboot, it wasn't about, oh, this guy has possessed this doll by using voodoo. It was a bad computer program. So, you're dealing with AI. This is what's happening. Same thing with Annabelle. I'm sorry, not Annabelle, Megan. The idea that it's going to be technology. So, basically they made a Frankenstein version of Chucky, and they made a Frankenstein version. I'm sorry, Annabelle. I keep wanting to say Annabelle. They made Megan another version or another iteration or adaptation of Frankenstein. But Friday the 13th, the reboot, very underrated because, again, you updated it for a newer audience that's not going to be as connected to the originals. And the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. It was, let's go ahead and reboot this franchise, reboot and create a new film. But it didn't hit. I mean, that's the movie where they made, Freddy. He's not just a janitor who's killing kids. He's a janitor who's molesting kids, and the parents retaliate. And it just did not hit as well. Where you had Freddy making those jokes, or she had Robert Englund making the jokes and making Freddy more of a horror comedic slasher character. Suspiria. Very good reboot with Tilda Swinton. Halloween is debatable if it's a reboot or not. What was the other? Oh, It.
Yeah.
So you had the previous version. I can't watch the previous version because I like It Chapter 1. Chapter 2 gets a little bit dicey, but It Chapter 1 is just so well done with the visuals, with the not necessarily CGI, but the special effects, the practical effects, the actors portraying the characters, to where you now don't have the nostalgia that's connecting the film to the individual. You have the nostalgia that's connecting the individual to that time period. So instead of it being the 50s, we're in the 80s looking back at the 50s, you're in the 2000s or the 20 teens looking back at the 80s. So for somebody like me who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, I look at it as like, wow, I can relate to this story because I remember what it was like to go out with, hang out with my friends. I remember what it was like to go ride bikes and just do nothing all day except just be a kid. But then you look back on what these kids are afraid of, and it really captures what you'd be afraid of as a kid or as an adult. Like it becomes that thing where fear becomes focused and individualized. So it's not necessarily everybody has this general fear of this. So we're not talking about public speaking or being naked in public or anything like that. The one kid is afraid of this one painting at the synagogue. He's afraid of this one painting. Then you got this one kid who's, he's got Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So he's afraid of everything that could get him sick. Germs are everywhere. You got this girl who's afraid of her sexually abusive father. You're seeing all these things playing out, but you also get this taste, which I don't feel they got with the original adaptation. You get this taste of how everybody has to deal with their fears individually. And it's not until you can really deal with those fears until you talk to somebody else about it. And they may be receptive to it. They may be able to help you out. They might not be able to do anything other than listen to you. But understanding that I'm scared of this, I don't know what to do. And that's probably the biggest thing that makes this a good adaptation, is that it's able to capture fear in a way, not necessarily through a child's eyes, but it's presenting it to you through a child's eye. And now you're processing it how you are as an adult, but also how you probably felt as a kid with those same things. And even looking back on it, you think about things that you were afraid of as a kid. You're like, why the hell was I afraid of that? I'm going to make a major admission because I forgot to get it the other day. When I was a kid, we would go to the Mississippi State Fair, and on all these little vendor things, they would have like, hot dogs, hamburgers, whatever the fair food was. And then it would say elephant ears. And I'm like, I'm not eating that. My dad got one. I didn't know it was basically like a big churro, but a big flat churro. And I freaked out because I'm like, I don't want to eat that. Like I'm scared. And so he tried to give some to me, and I was completely petrified of eating this one thing. Come to find out, it was just cinnamon and sugar. It was just a pastry. But being in the South, if somebody says, hey, this is a pig ear sandwich, like, it's a pig ear sandwich.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, all these elephants. That's so wrong.
They were endangered.
Why?
No, not
Why?
Dumbo.
Can we not fry one thing in the South for once?
Dumbo, no. That's what happened to his mom after he was taken away from his mom for years.
Oh. All the elephants that died in the Barnum Bailey's 3-ring circus.
That's what was scary to me as a kid, like pink elephant scene where like Dumbo gets drunk and doesn't know what's going on. That was pretty, the psychedelic nightmare of underage drinking. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, as for remakes, I don't feel like I have a whole lot of experience with them. Except maybe the new iteration of It, and even then I didn't watch the second half. I'm very bad at going to movies. I basically have to be bullied into it. I don't enjoy the experience. So I was bullied by friends. Like everybody was going, and I was there, so I had to go. So that first part of that movie was really, really good. But saying that, I never watched the 90s. Was it actually a miniseries or like something like that? The 90s one was...
Yeah, I think the 90s one was a series, yeah.
Yeah. I never watched that. Like, it was never part of anything for me. But when it comes to, so the one that I would come up with is a bit more abstract, and that would be the various iterations of the Mummy. So we have the Karloff version in the 30s, and then we have the Brendan Fraser version in the 90s, and then we had the Tom Cruise's middle tooth in the last few years.
That's the Mummy's curse.
Okay, everybody knows that I'm a huge Brendan Fraser fan, and the Mummy is like my favorite movie, like way up there. And I remember thinking like, okay, I need to fight my bias and try the new one, because I fly all the time internationally, and they had the movie. So I decided to try it, and I did not make it more than 3 minutes. And I'm serious, 3 minutes into this movie because it was so bad. But I went into that knowing that I probably have a bias because of my nostalgia for the old movie and from seeing the Universal Movie Monsters versions when I was younger. I grew up a block away from Universal Studios in Orlando, so the Universal Movie Monsters are like pinnacles in my mind.
No,
so like
it wasn't nostalgia. You have taste.
Oh, is that what it? Okay, I'll take it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think that's the only real experience I have, and it wasn't good. So that's all I can say about it. But we're gonna have to wrap this up. So Mark, you want to hit us with yours, and we're gonna have to end the show.
Yeah.
I don't mind them. I don't like the thing like they did, like the example I had with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, where it's like, oh yeah, of course it's kids and their phones and being obsessed with getting back to the city because they don't have Wi-Fi reception.
It's like, what a boomer would think like millennials and Gen Z would do.
That's what the real thing is. Let's stop boomers making movies.
Yeah.
Like you get 3 strikes.
Action.
You get 3 strikes and then you can't make a movie ever again.
Or if you complain about the other movies out there, these comic book movies are ruining cinema. Like
the trap door opens under you and into
you lose all your social. You lose your social
filmmakers like Christopher Nolan. I'm like, do you realize Christopher Nolan directed the Batman trilogy? Why? No, that's not the same. It's like, yeah, it's the same. It's okay.
Nolan fanboys, but as old people.
Oh God. he really in the back of his head like really wanted to get a nuke for that movie. He was just like, if the government would have been like, all right, we'll give you a 100%. Small tactical nuke to shoot off for the movie, he totally would have done it. He would have been like, fuck yeah, let's go.
Joker's hands.
And then he would have directed the reboot of The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh my God. Oh, Jesus.
I want to make this historically accurate. So we're going to make a bunch of people into mutants. Okay.
The old fashioned way with radiation.
And they're going to be orphans. I'm Christopher Nolan. Oh my God. All right, y'all. Jesus. At What's Left of the South, we believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to click on make sure to click on our link tree in the show notes. Yeah, it's 100 episodes. You're going to get this shit right.
This is a professional production over here.
I think I'd have this shit memorized by now. I've said it for 100 fucking episodes. Make sure to click on our link tree in the show notes to find all of our social media, our brand new merch store with awesome designs, including some new designs coming soon if Mark ever, decides to, stop being Mark or whatever. And speaking of Mark, all the proceeds from the merch store go to help Mark pay for top surgery. And subscribe to our Patreon to hear our wildly crazy, inappropriate After Dark series. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers. My phone. Okay. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers, Jenna, Alan, and Intuitive Tumbleweed. Our producer is Mr. Speaker. Our theme music is by the band The Last Thing You Remember. Edited by Psychotic Refuge. We are coming to you from the Magic City, Birmingham, Alabama, as well as sweet Georgia and jolly old England. We would like to recognize that we're recording on land occupied and rightfully belongs to the Muskogee and Cherokee nations. Don, real quick, I know you've been on before, but for any new listeners, where can people find you?
Oh my gosh. Hopefully they don't find me. But anyway, I'm on all the socials. I still call it Twitter because if Elon is going to dead name his own child, I'm going to go ahead and dead name his service.
Yeah.
So Twitter at Don Guillory, TikTok, Instagram, the Token Black Guide, or just go to my website, donaldrguillory.com.
Hell yeah. We'll get your website in the show notes. I'll just get it from the other episodes. Drop your
Why are you acting like I was gonna attack you, man?
what?
You can take him.
Yeah, the Ball Brotherhood. What? We can't fight with the Ball Brotherhood. What?
What?
Oh my god, Don, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We definitely got to do it
I
again.
always love coming on.
Definitely got to do. We got to do an actual. We got to do another historical episode with you because that episode was really good about with your dissertation. That was awesome.
Yeah, as we get closer to it, and I'm done, and I don't have to worry about embargoes on it, or have to worry about anybody stealing my research.
Hell yeah. You can just do your actual defense on the podcast.
On here, you know.
I'm down.
Hell yeah.
Well, here's what I learned. Here's what I learned. Barry Goldwater was a piece of shit.
Yeah, amen to that. All right, Sweet Mark. Yeah, fuck him. Not Sweet Mark. Barry Goldwater can get fucking rot in hell with Ronald Reagan. Sweet Mark, what you got for us?
Shop smart, shop S smart.